Let me put some chat up. Hello. Hello everyone, I hope you are all okay. Excellent, I'm on air, that's what we like to see. Thank you, Claire. Nice to be here. I hope everybody is okay and all in position. I'm in quite a noisy spot at the moment, so don't worry about that. There might be a little bit of traffic noise here, but we will soon be moving to hopefully some slightly quieter places, although, you know, we'll see. So great to have everybody here on this Sunday afternoon, hoping that the quality of the signal remains strong throughout, although we are going through some quite underneath and between some pretty old buildings. So if we do have a slight dip, as always, I will get as quickly as I can to a place where the signal comes back for you. Great to see all of you saying hello in the chat. It's scrolling up quite quickly. So Beatrice, a huge Toblerone. I saw that chat. That's Elizabeth. That's no problem at all. If you want to get a repeat of the Peace, Love and Understanding tour, just do a donation on, you usually use Ko-fi, I think, don't you, Elizabeth? Do a donation on there for the price of the tour, and when I see that pop up, I will send you the link. I will message you either by email or on Facebook Messenger or something and send you the link. So hello to everyone. Hello, Donna. Who can I see in the chat there that I haven't said hello to? Hello, Dawn. Hello, Robin. Hello, David. Wendy. Daisy, maybe as well. Lovely to have so many people here. And Susan and Marlene, hi. Look, oh, it's great to see so many familiar faces, names, those kinds of things. Hello, Laurie. And Ronnie's here as well. We got a whole lot of the old crowd. Elizabeth, whichever's easiest for you, I don't mind. I have multiple ones so that the people booking the tours can use whichever one is most convenient for them. So whether that's buy me a coffee or Ko-fi or PayPal or whatever you want, just as long as you do it and then I see that you've done it, I get a notification and then I'll know what it's for, and then I'll just I'll send you the link. Elizabeth, I'm calling all of you old. Lethargy we have as well. We got everybody here. So lovely to have everyone. And, well, I don't think any of us are going to be feeling very old soon, because I'm going to be talking very shortly about really dates that are a long, long way in the past. So when I start talking about some of these places and people associated with Gloucester, we're all going to feel super young, super modern, at least for a few minutes anyway. So that's good, and I'm delighted you're all here, and I'm delighted that you've all joining me today. And it's Robin Salajane is good. She's been taking advantage of having some peace and quiet with me out all day to get some of her work done. I think she's been planning some of her language lessons and recording some YouTube videos as well. Claire Boudica, are we going back? We're going back to before the time of Boudica, just about, I think. At least contemporaneous anyway. Donna, Emma was planning to come, but she's having some issues with her plumbing. And I don't mean like herself, I mean like her plumbing in her bathroom. So she's sorting that out at the moment. So I don't think she's going to be done in time to get herself on the tour. She's got to get her water switched off and arrange for someone to come and fix a loose connection or a faulty washer or something like that. So it looks like it's about time to begin, and I want to say a huge warm welcome. I can hear a clock somewhere. I think it's the cathedral striking the hour, so it's lovely to have everybody here, and great to see so many familiar people, and delighted that you're able to join me, and delighted that we can operate this tour so that so many people can watch it. And thank you very much to everyone who contributed to the tour, to the sponsored tour fund for this one. And you know, your generosity is so appreciated, and I'm sure not just by me but by people who are able to join the tours because of your generosity. I'm Sean Connery all of a sudden. So yeah, and the next round of sponsored tour funds are now open, so you know, feel free to throw anything you want to in those. They're just on Buy Me a Coffee. It's not on Ko-fi. They don't have a wish list function, but you know, just any amount, it builds up, and then we can do more sponsored tours for everyone. So great to see everyone, and it's great to be here having put the clocks back. I'm glad people managed to get here on time. Well, some of you might have been here an hour, I don't know. I'm really pleased to be starting the tour today, because it's nice to have some company. Today's not been an easy day. Maybe some of you on Facebook saw my post this morning. As a lot of you will know, I'm a huge hockey fan, or ice hockey as we call it in England. And unfortunately, very tragically, last night one of the players for my team was actually killed during a game. His throat was slit by a skate blade and he didn't make it. And it's obviously just a huge tragic event for all of us. I obviously didn't know him personally, but it's you know, such a shame. 29 years old, playing the sport that he loves. And you know, I wasn't at the game. It was a road trip game, so I wasn't at it. But you know, thinking a lot about his family over in North America. His name's Adam Johnson, former player with the Pittsburgh Penguins in the NHL for a brief spell. And thoughts with his family, with everyone associated with him and his friends, and with our team as well, the teammates and officials who witnessed it. So I do have my team shirt on today, as I never wear it anywhere apart from when I actually go to a game, but I'm wearing it today. So and it's nice to be here doing something that where I've got other people around me. So thank you for being here, and just wanted to mention that before we went on the tour, and to dedicate the tour in some way to Adam and to the Panthers and to the hockey community. So we are starting in sort of a place on the edge of the city of Gloucester, and that is really because of a place that you would find if you were to kind of drive along this road here for about a mile. We're not going to go along there because it's pretty much just a residential area, but you will come to kind of a little area of Gloucester that is called Kingsholm, and that is Kingsholm, Holm. And Kingsholm is kind of a little area of the city, and it's also the name of the rugby stadium that is the home of Gloucester Rugby Club, which is the biggest sporting team in the city. And that name originally derives from a royal palace that was on that site. And it was a royal palace not any time recently. It was established as a royal palace before we even had England. Okay, so before England was one unified country, there was a royal palace there where the rulers of this part of England, the Kingdom of Mercia, actually were living for part of the year, holding their parliaments, having their residence. So it was kind of a political and royal centre for a lot of the medieval period. Kings would hold parliaments here. The king who is best known for holding parliaments here was one of our last Anglo Saxon kings, a king called Edward the Confessor. And he held in total 9 parliaments here at Gloucester, at Kingsholm. And the parliament back then was called the Witan. And most famously, he held a huge parliament here in the year 1051. And that was to gain support for some of his nobles to deal with an uprising within the country. But Kingsholm as a royal site goes back much further than that, as we will discover. Gloucester itself goes back much further than that, because it was originally a Roman settlement. It was founded initially as a Roman legionary fortress at a strategic crossing point on the River Severn. The River Severn is just outside the centre of the city, just over to our right. There's a sort of a retail park here, and just on the other side of that is the River Severn. And the Romans founded a fortress here which was called Glevum, and that was in the early years of the Roman invasion, so around 48 AD. And 50 years later, that legionary fortress was expanded into a civilian settlement, and it was named after the Emperor Nerva, who was the Roman emperor at that time. And it was it was originally a Roman city, and an important city in medieval times because it had links to the royal houses of the various states that Gloucester was in at that time, and it was also one of our big centres of religion. There were numerous monasteries, priories, abbeys around Gloucester, some of them linked to the presence of royalty here. And here we get our first view. You're going to get quite a few views of this, including some very close-up ones. But here's our first view of the most famous building within Gloucester. We can see the amazing tower of Gloucester Cathedral rising up there. We're going to be heading up there before too long, because there's a lot of royal links there. And that's what we're really talking about on this tour. We're exploring the history of Gloucester through its links to royalty, dating back about 1,400 years. Now, we've talked about King Edward the Confessor, but way before him, royalty here. And the ruin in front of me here is part of a little monastery that was established here in the year 909. And it was originally called St. Peter's. And it was changed to St. Oswald's because some of the relics of St. Oswald, who had been a king of the English kingdom of Northumberland, actually we'll be talking about him a lot next week, because we'll be doing a tour in Oswestry, which is named after him actually. But some of the relics of St. Oswald were brought here to this particular monastery, and so it was renamed St. Oswald's Priory, and it was founded by a king of Mercia. It was founded by a chap by the name of Ethelred, and that was quite a common name. So there's a very famous English king called Ethelred the Unready. That's not him, it's just a common name in Anglo Saxon England. Ethelred of Mercia, who is buried here, but also buried here is his wife, who was the main founder of this priory, and a lady, one of the great ladies of English history. She was one of the kick-ass ladies of English history that we had in our poll on YouTube back in the summer that Sally Jane spoke about. I'm talking about Ethelfled, Lady of the Mercians, the daughter of King Alfred the Great, and one of the great figures of English medieval history. Ethelfled, who led her troops, led her country after the death of her husband, fighting off Vikings. And she was responsible for the establishment of this monastery. Her husband died before it had been completed, and they are both, or were both, buried within the precincts of this monastery. Now, somebody asked why one of the arches is covered in. I think probably just for safety, to make it secure, so that to keep it standing, really, to firm it up, because it is quite a delicate ruin, and it is hugely ancient, hugely important. And it is pretty amazing, though, that this monastery, named after a king of Northumberland who was made a saint, and founded by a king of Mercia and a great leader of medieval England, Ethelfled, Lady of the Mercians, as well. So now let's, which is the best way? This way. Now these days Gloucester is a city of about 135,000 people. So it's quite a decent sized city. It's a modern city, got quite a lot of industry. It was known in the past for engineering, and for particularly engineering relating to shipping, and also for aviation, the strong aviation industry. But it grew up really mainly as a port, a trading port on the River Severn. There were huge docks in Gloucester, and we're quite far south, so what could happen at Gloucester would be that goods could be brought down the River Severn and overland to the Gloucester docks, where they could be loaded onto much larger ships to go down the Severn estuary and out to the Bristol Channel and to the Atlantic Ocean. So it was a very important port city, and there were a lot of wealthy merchants here, and it had a lot of very prosperous people living here who had huge land holdings in the Cotswolds and in the surrounding area, and who had benefited at the closure of all the monasteries around here from all the land and wealth that was up for grabs. Corinne, yes, we have those annoying renter scooters, yes we do, unfortunately. So never quite know where they're going to go, and neither do the people who are riding them. Okay, so we've got a couple of really interesting things to show you here, and first of all we got a lovely little church. It's believed by archaeological records that there was originally a timber-built church on this site in the 6th century, way back. The church that we see today is mainly medieval with later Victorian additions, but the site, in terms of a religious foundation, is the oldest in Gloucester. It's called St Mary de Lode, and that word lode, L-O-D-E, was an Old English word that meant a watercourse, a channel of water. So it was there was kind of a subsidiary channel coming off the River Severn that flowed close to here. There was a mill on it belonging to one of the big monasteries, and there was the church here as well, people living there, and so that was why it had that name, St Mary de Lode. Still, it's not an active church anymore. It's cared for by the Church's Preservation Trust. Now here, just outside the cathedral precincts, we have a very interesting memorial, and I'm going to show you this chap. And I'm turning to Sean Connery again. This is Bishop Hooper's memorial. Bishop Hooper was, as the name suggests, he was a bishop of Gloucester, and he was Bishop John Hooper. He was quite an interesting figure because he was a very radical preacher in 16th century England at the time of the Reformation, and he was quite unique in the sense that he fell foul of both Protestant and Catholic monarchs, and was imprisoned by one and executed by the other. So in the time of King Edward VI, which is when the Reformation was gathering pace in England, he was raised in a kind of a Calvinist tradition, so very radical, and that level of radicalism in religion was not yet really that acceptable in England, even in the Protestant communities. And they, I'm really sorry, folks, there's people who think they want to drive me out by... I'm going to move along a little bit and tell you about Bishop Hooper from somewhere else, because... No, I'm sorry, I'm in the middle of doing a live broadcast around the world, thank you. They were standing there just chatting until we came, and then they decided to start singing. So I'm going to move away and tell you a bit more about Bishop Hooper. So during the time of Edward VI, he was considered too radical as a preacher and was imprisoned for a short time. But as the Reformation gathered pace, he was kind of... he moderated his tone a little bit, and he became more of a mainstream figure, and he was appointed Bishop of Gloucester by King Edward VI, who was a boy king, only legitimate son of King Henry VIII. Now, of course, Edward VI died at a very young age in 1551, and after a very short spell with Lady Jane Grey as queen, we ended up with Mary I on the throne. Mary I, a staunch Roman Catholic. So, of course, Bishop Hooper was in the firing line because he was the most radical of the reforming bishops. And he was stripped of his title, and he was actually tried in 1554 for heresy because he refused to denounce his reforming beliefs. And he was brought here from prison in London, and he was burned at the stake on that particular spot where the memorial and the monument now stands, within sight of his old cathedral and the cathedral gatehouse. Some of the cathedral clergy who had worked under him but who now were having to work under the Roman Catholic priests, the new bishop, they were forced to watch from the gatehouse of the cathedral. Natalie, we'll be talking more about Lady Jane Grey in a little while, so we'll move on a little bit, and I'm going to show you a statue of a king, but we can't go very close to it because it's not in a place that you would expect to find a statue of a king. It's basically right next to these modern houses, and it's so I don't really want to go, and people don't want disturbing on their Sunday afternoon by us walking past their houses filming. But if you look just along the end of the little pathway that leads to the houses here, can you see this statue against the wall? I wish I had a zoom function, but unfortunately we don't have one on the Streamlabs yet. But you can see that statue there. Actually, you probably feel that it will look better from here because it's in very poor condition, because it was actually kind of demolished and buried in several parts and was kind of discovered and put back together. It's a statue of King Charles II. So why is there a statue of King Charles II in such an inauspicious place? Well, he was installed here in 1960, the statue having been rediscovered after being demolished. It had previously stood in various places in Gloucester after being first created in 1662, 2 years after the monarchy in England was restored and Charles II came to the throne. And they erected a statue to him, as did many cities. But he was never very popular in Gloucester. Perhaps why his statue nowadays is not in a great place, because people have long memories, and there are indeed some local people who said he should be moved to a better spot, and there are other councillors who say no, he should not. The reason being that when he became king, Charles II punished people and cities that had sided with the cause of the parliamentarians against his father Charles I during the English Civil War. And one of those cities that had been staunchly parliamentarian was Gloucester, which had actually been besieged by Charles I and his armies during the Civil War. And Charles II stripped Gloucester of many special privileges that it had. It had been granted them almost 200 years previously by another English king, Richard III. Richard III had been Duke of Gloucester. That's what his title was. So he had strong links to the city. And when he became king, he granted very special privileges to the town council of Gloucester and to the city itself. And Charles II reversed those privileges that Richard III had granted Gloucester. And so he wasn't seen as very popular. It's probably one of the reasons why his statue was never treated very well and why he's now on a little housing estate. So these buildings across the way are some of the oldest parts of the cathedral precincts. So we have here the timber-framed buildings which date back partly to the 14th and 15th centuries. They were accommodation for some of the clergy and monks, because the cathedral, as is today, was originally the biggest of the monasteries in Gloucester. It was called St. Peter's Abbey. And so there was a large monastic community living there. And these timber frame buildings stand next to St. Mary's Gate, which was one of the main gateways to the Abbey, and it's now one of the main gateways to the cathedral precincts. Now, stand by, I don't know how my signal is going to hold up when I walk through it, but this gateway dates back to the 12th century in parts. So let's walk under it and make our way into the cathedral complex. Oh, it's held up pretty well. Wow, that's held up pretty well, didn't it? So we're inside the cathedral precincts, and there is the cathedral up ahead of us again. We're going to keep seeing it, and we'll take a proper look, and I'm going to tell you about the cathedral's royal links very, very shortly. But this was a huge abbey, St. Peter's Abbey, originally founded in the year 679, 679, and refounded in the 11th century by a man named Abbot Serlo in the late 11th century, and he set about building a new abbey church that formed the basis of the vast cathedral that we see today. Now, when the monasteries were all closed by Henry VIII in the 1530s, St. Peter's Abbey was closed, so the monastery itself, but the beautiful the Abbey church was converted into being a cathedral. That was because the church had so many links to some of Henry VIII's predecessors as English kings, including some people that he was directly descended from. He did not want to have it demolished. He felt that would not really be even Henry VIII wasn't prepared to do that. That tells you something. But around it, we have the Cathedral Close area, and new buildings were built in the subsequent centuries, the 16th, 17th, particularly 18th centuries. Some of them belonged to the cathedral, others belonged to private individuals. So this was kind of one of the wealthiest and most prestigious addresses within the city of Gloucester. You know, if you could afford to have a property here. These days, most of them belong to the cathedral and its various administrative offices and accommodation for members of the cathedral community. But this particular building is one of probably the grandest. It was built in the early 18th century by a wealthy local merchant, and then later it was lived in by a widow who was a very eccentric local figure, and she used to attend worship in the cathedral, and the cathedral allowed her to keep a little bird cage with a robin in it inside the cathedral at the end of her regular pew. And they would clean up any mess that the bird made, and he'd put up with it chirping during prayers and so on. The reason being, well, two reasons. One is because this eccentric old lady was adamant that this robin was a reincarnation of the spirit of her deceased daughter. But the other reason was that she was donating quite a lot of money to the cathedral for upkeep and maintenance and so on. So they kind of said, oh, well, you know, we can make an exception because you're dipping deep into your purse to help fund the cathedral operations. So just a quirky little story there. But you can see very, very grand buildings here that belonged to wealthy residents. And the huge one here with the partial timber framing. This was also acquired in the 18th century by a wealthy local man, and he made it into a kind of an assembly room for meetings and banquets and things like that. It was kind of an entertainment venue, which is not really what you'd think you would have next to the cathedral. But that's exactly what they had, and it was kind of the most exclusive entertainment venue for wealthy people in Gloucester at that time. Now, shall we go and find something that another English king did for Gloucester? He didn't put the temporary toilets up. So they've had a lot of restoration done here in recent years. They've really had a sort of new stone seats put there and a lovely little garden area. We're not leaving the cathedral behind. And, Beatrice. I know Beatrice particularly loves these. I know a lot of people do, though. Here's a postbox topper. We got hedgehogs. We got mushrooms. We got pumpkins. We got a bit of everything. There we go. So there were various gateways into the cathedral district, into the cathedral part of town, and this was actually one of the main ones. Not much of it remains. It was actually a substantial gateway that would almost be a defensive gateway if the monastery ever needed to defend itself. And if the idea being was that if the city were attacked, they could pull back behind the walls of the castle and the abbey. There'd be two strong points to defend the city. But when this gateway was under reconstruction, I mean, we're going back a long time. We're going back to the early years of the 14th century. Because this was one of the most important abbeys in the country, and there was a royal palace in Gloucester still at that time, this new gateway was paid for by King Edward I, and it was known therefore as King Edward's Gate. Only this side now remains of the original gateway that once went all over the road here and would have had a similar tower on both sides. So this is King Edward's Gate, Edward I, and I said that the abbey was founded in the year 679. Well, halfway up the gate there is a stone shield that is believed to be the shield representing a man by the name of Osric. And Osric was king of an area that was called the people of the Hwicce. That was even before Gloucester was part of Mercia, back in the 7th century. And that was the shield and insignia of Osric, who was the founder of Gloucester Cathedral. And this ancient this ancient piece of stone was discovered, buried somewhere within the abbey precincts where it had been part of the demolition at the Reformation. And in the 19th century, it was moved and it was placed here on King Edward's Gate. So the mounting that it's on is a relatively modern one, but the stonework itself is much, much older. Okay, so shall we teased you long enough? Let's have a good proper look at this cathedral. Unfortunately, we can't go inside it because I've asked them on several occasions if I can do a virtual tour inside, and they've never been very positive about doing it, but we can enjoy it from the outside and tell you about some of, oh, here comes a car, tell you about some of its royal links. Well, it was founded by that man, Osric, who was, we don't know exactly whether he was a king or a prince, but he was certainly the leader of the territory that Gloucester fell into at that time. Refounded in the 11th century by Abbot Serlo, who was brought over from Normandy by the new King William I. And inside the cathedral, towards the rear, you have some of the original 11th century columns, the huge circular squat Norman columns at the rear of the church from their original 11th century. Most of what we see, though, as you go further forward through the interior and what we see on the exterior, this is Gothic architecture. This is perpendicular Gothic architecture, one of the best examples anywhere from the 14th and early 15th centuries. Absolutely beautiful, isn't it? So, royal links. Well, the first royal link is that buried within the precincts of the cathedral and commemorated by a beautiful memorial is a man who should have been King of England on 2 occasions, but never was. He is a man by the name of Robert of Normandy. Robert of Normandy was the oldest son of King William I, William the Conqueror. And so he had spent quite a bit of time over here in Gloucester at the Royal Palace at King's Home, and he knew the abbey, he knew the town. But as he was old enough and as he became more established, his father William sent his oldest son Robert over to Normandy to look after the Norman lands, and he then stayed over here to rule over England. So when William I died, in theory, Robert, as the oldest son, should have taken the throne, but he was over in Normandy, and that was a much more difficult proposition to get over there. You know, by the time the news had reached him, his younger brother, William, had taken the initiative and had got himself crowned as William II. So people are having issues. I've got the same signal strength reading as when I started, so I'm not sure what's going on. Maybe just a bit of interference from other people in the area. But unfortunately, there's not very much that I'm able to do about it. I can move a little bit into the central section here, away from the buildings a little bit, see if that makes any difference. So I'll move out into a bit more central space. We might not get quite as full a view of the cathedral. So Robert of Normandy, his brother William II was quickly got onto the throne, and so Robert had to settle for remaining Robert of Normandy, and he went on crusade. He went on the first crusade. And while he was away on the first crusade, his brother, William II, died or was killed. And of course, again, as the oldest brother, William II didn't have any descendants. Well, Robert should have been king. But again, youngest brother Henry well, where's my brother? He's not here, he's on crusade. Had himself quickly crowned as Henry I. By the time Robert of Normandy came back from the Crusades, got back to Normandy, found out what had happened, he raised an army and came over to England to try to seize the throne that should rightfully be his. But nobody really knew him in England, so he didn't really have much support. And so he was defeated by Henry, and he was imprisoned for pretty much for the rest of his life at Cardiff Castle. It's very much associated with Cardiff Castle. And but when he died, he left instructions that he wanted to be buried in St Peter's Abbey here in Gloucester, and he was. And there's a beautiful memorial to him, a wooden carving from the 12th century that was commissioned by knights of the Third Crusade in honour of one of their most notable predecessors as Crusader knights from England. So he should have been king, but never was. But in 1216, this church, this Abbey church, was the site of a coronation of an English king. King John, who is not renowned for being one of our better kings, was having a lot of trouble. Uprisings from his barons. The southern part of England had been invaded by French forces, and there were many barons who were trying to put Louis of France on the English throne. So when King John died in 1216, the supporters of the royal family needed to act quickly. His young son Henry was only 9, but he was here at Kingsholm with his mother Isabella. And so they brought him quickly to the abbey here, and they had him crowned using his mother's necklace as a crown, because the royal crown wasn't here in Gloucester. And once he had been crowned and anointed by such a senior abbot, and he'd got allegiance from a lot of the barons, there was no other churchman who was going to go against that anointing and try to crown another claimant king. So they acted quickly. So at the age of just 9 years old, Henry III was crowned King of England here in Gloucester. One of the only English kings to be crowned anywhere but Westminster Abbey. Corinne, the wooden carving is not an inscription, it's a figure. It is a wooden carving of him, as depicted as a Crusader knight. He was actually buried in the old medieval chapter house, which was destroyed at the Reformation. So Henry III crowned here at just 9, so pretty amazing. So a coronation site as well. Now there's one other king, or 2 other kings associated with this cathedral before we move on. One of them, Edward II. Edward II of England, seen as a weak king, and his queen and her lover, Roger Mortimer, they usurped his power. They captured him and they put him in prison at a place in called Berkeley Castle, just down the road from here, and Roger Mortimer and Queen Isabella tried to rule England in his place, and he died under mysterious circumstances, maybe, presumably, it has always been thought murdered at Berkeley Castle, and his body was brought here to St Peter's Abbey to be buried, and he is buried inside the cathedral. Now when his young son Edward claimed his throne and became Edward III, he commissioned a beautiful tomb for his father here in the Abbey Church, and it is an incredible medieval tomb with this alabaster figure of Edward II lying there. And it became, because he was a murdered king, he wasn't declared a saint, but his tomb became a site of pilgrimage, and income from the pilgrims and also the donations that King Edward III gave to make sure that his father was lying in a fitting place. That is why the cathedral looks the way it does today, because that was in the period when all of this beautiful Gothic work was done. So you know, Edward II buried here, Edward III created the tomb for him and paid a lot of money to have the cathedral developed in the way we see it today. So pretty amazing, all of these kings, but plenty more royal connections to tell you about yet, including here at the cathedral, because as we go around to the rear of the cathedral, I mean the west end to give it its official title, and it is the back, but you know, they did become king at some crazy ages. I mean, who have we talked about so far? Edward VI, he became king at 9, did he? I think 9. Henry III, he became king at 9. Edward III seized his throne through armed sort of uprising at the age of 15. You know, they're pretty amazing. Dorna, I wouldn't be able to do a tour inside at Berkeley, I don't think, unfortunately. So, sort of it's hard to make out, but essentially the buildings here that now house parts of the, they have the a fantastic little tea room and cafe called the Monk's Kitchen attached to the cathedral, and there's various kind of offices and sort of rooms within there. But that was once the this was called the Abbot's Lodgings. So that was where the abbot lived. So obviously the head man of this amazing monastery. So you'd expect him to have a grand residence, the Abbot's Lodging. But it was also where high-ranking guests would stay. So if they had high-ranking guests, the abbot would move out for a little bit. And so probably the most famous visit here was a visit of several days made here by King Henry VIII with his second of his 6 wives, Anne Boleyn. And they came here for a stay of several days. They stayed here at the abbey just before it was closed. Yes, it was. Trying to participate. They went out, there's a lovely story that they went out hunting in the area around Gloucester each day. And on the first day they went out and they got back just as night was falling. And 10 local people were waiting at the city gate with torches to guide, not like battery torches, obviously, flame torches, to guide them back to their lodgings through the streets. And to thank them, the king and Anne Boleyn gave them all some money. The second night when they went out hunting, when they got back, there were 50 local people with torches, because word had spread that, oh, we went last night and had a torch for the king and he gave us some money. And so 5 times the number turned up the following night. So that's a lovely little story of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn staying here. So somebody was asking about Prince William, the Prince of Wales, when he becomes king, he would be King William V. Presuming he elects to keep the name William, which, I mean, obviously is his first name, but he can actually use any of his Christian names as his regnal name, but if he sticks to William, he will be William V. So we're going to go through the inner gate, and this was the gate that led really from here. Would have been sort of the public part of the monastery where visitors could come, and the monks would be here, but pilgrims and visitors would be able to come. This led to kind of the private quarters where the senior monks lived, and where some of the sort of administration and the treasury and so on of the monastery would have been. So this little courtyard is called Miller's Green, because on a little channel that had been cut out of one of the branches of the River Severn here, the abbey had its mill just over there back in the day. But nowadays, 18th century buildings again that were built here. And this is called the Deanery. It was the official residence of the Dean, which is the second to the bishop. He's the administrative head, really, of the cathedral community. Now, ready for another king? We've got a timber framed building here. In fact, it's half stone, half timber framed. Dates back to the 14th century. And it's called the Parliament House because it was a room that was used for meeting of senior clergy. And when he was king, King Richard II, he was staying at Gloucester. And often when kings were staying at Gloucester, they did not want to hold their parliaments at their royal palace because there weren't really the facilities for it. So they wanted to hold them somewhere official. So this was where they held them. They would hold them at the Abbey quite a bit in that later medieval period. And Richard II held a parliament here during the 14th century when this building was pretty new. And ever since then, it has been called the Parliament House. So Richard II, he was here as well. We're making our way around. The building in front of us these days is part of the school. So there's a school here called the King's School. It used to be the Abbey School. So, you know, the monasteries in medieval England were the main places of education in our country. But when they all closed down, obviously, that had a massive impact because there was suddenly hardly any schools. And so you find a lot of the oldest schools were founded either by King Henry VIII or by his son King Edward VI, because they were essentially just refounding the old monastery schools under a new name. And that's what happened here. Henry VIII refounded the school, the King's School. This building, though, was not built until the 19th century, and it was built as the Bishop's Palace. So it's where the bishop lived. But the bishops only lived here for, less than 100 years because they built a modern facility for the bishops to live in just up the road. And this was then taken over by the King's School, which had always occupied buildings in this area. So the walls here enclosed the Abbey. So they would have been the outer walls of St. Peter's Abbey. And obviously buildings were built outside them later when it was not an abbey anymore, when the cathedral had just been existing. So we see the outer buildings of the monastery and later for senior clergy of the cathedral. And I come here to Gloucester quite a bit in the summer times, because I do my Harry Potter tours, and the medieval cloister, the beautiful cloisters. We are so lucky that they didn't destroy the cloisters of Gloucester Cathedral as part of the monastery. And they were used extensively in the Harry Potter movies. And the kids from the King's School, a lot of them played extras in the Harry Potter movies when they were filming here, because they needed a lot of kids to be walking through the corridors and running around and things in the corridors of Hogwarts. And those extras, a lot of them were students from the King's School. Now, the door is open. We're not going to be able to see very much because it's a combination lock, but we can maybe just look through and get a little tiny glimpse of those beautiful medieval cloisters, some of the finest medieval Gothic architecture you'll find anywhere in England, and I'll put a couple of photographs of them on the Facebook group later tonight for you, so you can have a look at them. So we've got a ruined section of the monastery here. So this archway, there's sort of a large building here, which was the infirmary. And the infirmary, obviously an important part of the monastery, because one of the functions that medieval monasteries served was to provide medical care and social care for the people of the local community, and the infirmary was part of that. That's why it was kind of at the outer edge of the monastery, if you like. It also provided a place where elderly people of the city who had no one to look after them, they could also live there. And so they had this huge infirmary. But after the monastery closed down, the infirmary was converted into sort of smaller residences for various staff of the cathedral. Some of the minor clergy, the musicians, the choristers, and one of those was the cathedral organist. And born here in one of these dwellings in the infirmary where we're standing right now was a man named John Stafford Smith. He was the son of the organist. He followed in his father's footsteps to become the cathedral organist here at Gloucester. John Stafford Smith is a name you may know, especially if you are from the USA, because he composed the tune that is your national anthem. He composed that piece, and it was chosen to be the music to which the words written, the Star Spangled Banner, were actually set to become the national anthem, John Stafford Smith. And inside the cathedral there is a plaque commemorating this, and there's a Stars and Stripes, there's a US flag hanging in a very prominent place in the cathedral to celebrate that. Sounds like we might have somebody singing. And we got a picture here, look, of inside the cathedral, the school, the choir boys from the school, and that shows us a little bit what the choir section of the interior of the cathedral looks like as well on the posters here. It's really quiet around here, it's lovely. And one of the main kind of buildings, if you like, that comes off the cloisters that was restored after the Reformation was the chapter house. Traditionally, the chapter house was where the monks would meet every morning, and they would have a reading. There's different opinions, maybe it was a bit of both, that whether it was a chapter from the Bible or a chapter from the rules of St. Benedict governing monastic life, because this was a Benedictine monastery. But they would meet in the chapter house every morning. And the Gothic chapter house, which is here, it's the building there, with the white car in front of it. It's the chapter house. And the chapter house is on the site of the medieval chapter house, and that was where King William I used to hold his parliaments, and he would always spend a great chunk of his winter at King's Home here at Gloucester in the Royal Palace, and it was at the Christmas Parliament back in the year 1085, which he held here in the chapter house, that he commissioned a great survey of his kingdom, which by that time he'd been ruling for about 19 years. And his commissioners went out all over the country recording population data, what kind of housing there was, what kind of agricultural production. It was so detailed. It was called the Great Survey, but it became known as the Doomsday Survey or the Doomsday Book, because English people said that it was so detailed that that the king would know as much about their lives as would be written in the book when they come to go to heaven on the day of judgment, or Doomsday as it was called. So we often talk about the Doomsday Book because it was actually it remains a fantastic resource for historical study to see what England was like in the 11th century. And it was here in the chapter house that King William I commissioned it. So that's onto here a bit, and we get another great view of that cathedral from a different angle, just as it's starting to get towards dusk. Beautiful. Now, we've not got very far to go, but we've got a couple of kings left to tell you about. Well, no, actually that's not true. We've got a king and we got a queen to tell you about. So let's press on. And we're going to see in a moment the east window of the cathedral. Actually, we're not going to get a great view of it here because it's the Lady Chapel. Trying to take you around, just around here a little bit, where we might get a view of the east window. No, we're not going to be able to get a good view of it from here. That's okay. Let's have one final look at Gloucester Cathedral for today, shall we? And then we will head off through back towards. No, we don't mean Freddie Mercury. It's raining kings. Well, I did tell you the tour's called Royal Gloucester, and it ain't just one or two royal links, and there are actually other royal links within the city of Gloucester, just other places that we're not covering on this particular tour. So let's come for one last king, shall we? And he's quite an important king in his own right, even if you haven't ever heard of him. We've got a church here called St. John's Church, which in recent years has been a Methodist church. But there's been a church on this site for a very, very, very long time. The first church that was built here was built just outside the very important Abbey of St. Peter, now the cathedral. And it was built in the 10th century by a man called King Athelstan. And King Athelstan was the King of Mercia, but he also became the King of Wessex. Those were the two most powerful kingdoms at that time in what became England. And he united all of these kingdoms. So he is known to history as the first king of a united England, Athelstan. And he founded the first church on this site, which was over the years replaced, of course, with this much later one. But pretty amazing that our very first king of a unified England. But even he, was preceded by Ethelred and Ethelfled. What a great name for a married couple, of Mercia. And even they were preceded way back by the founder of the cathedral, the Abbey, Osric. So we have one more monarch to tell you about, and we kind of come full circle because we're going right back to the upheaval, religious and political upheaval of the 16th century. We saw the memorial of Bishop Hooper, and I said that he was made a bishop by Edward VI and was tried for heresy and executed by Catholic Mary I. But in between those two monarchs came a very short stint of just 17 days. Knowing that Mary was the sort of, well, let's face it, the legitimate successor to the throne, and not wanting a Catholic back on the throne of England after their Reformation had been so successful, the Protestant faction in the English court had arranged to have a young girl of aristocratic birth by the name of Lady Jane Grey declared queen. And they did that by pronouncing her queen in several important locations around the country. One of them was in Gloucester, where Bishop Hooper was the most radical of the reforming clergy in the whole of the country. And it was here at the 15th century inn, the New Inn, from the balcony of the New Inn, that Lady Jane Grey was pronounced Queen in 1551. Part of the hotel is called Grey's Coffee House in her honour, but it's an amazing inn. It's what we call a gallery. It was built around 1450 originally, built by the Abbey because they had a lot of guests and pilgrims coming. And the fact it's called the New Inn tells us that they already had a few other inns in the city. They needed a new one, so here they built one. And it's one of the best preserved medieval inns in England. And I'm hoping that my signal doesn't go too much, but look at this amazing courtyard inn. Isn't that amazing? So all of those monarchs linked to Gloucester, going way back to the 7th century with Osric founding the Abbey, coming all the way through the medieval period to England, to the Normans, Plantagenets, Tudors, all the way through. And that is where we're going to end our tour tonight. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed this stroll around a city that I've not done virtual tours in for you before, in Gloucester, and I'm delighted that I've been able to do it with the thanks to having the sponsored tours. So thank you so much for your generosity, for everybody contributing to it. If you want to contribute to the next ones, head to Buy Me a Coffee, and you can find the next funds on the Wishlist page. What do I have coming up? Well, later this evening, if you want to have some more pre-Halloween entertainment, at 8:30 UK time this evening, that's 3.5 hours from now, whatever time that is where you are, I have another live premiere of an old Hago tour on YouTube. It is one of last year's ghost tours. Thank you, Beatrice, for putting up the link to the Padlet page where you can find links for everything. And so you can watch the Cheltenham tour as a live premiere later. I'm unfortunately not going to be able to make it onto the tour myself this evening, but you can watch the recording, you can chat to one another in the live chat, as always. And then tomorrow I am going to be in Nottingham, and at 8 p.m. I have a tour, and that is a completely free to join tour, tip supported if you are able to do so. But join me here on YouTube at 8 o'clock UK time for a ghostly tour of Nottingham, and on Tuesday, Halloween itself, we have our next sponsored tour, which is enabling me to go up to Chester to bring you a ghost tour from there as well. So thank you so much to everyone. We've got other tours coming up this week that you can book onto as live tours, and a live tour that you can book onto for next Sunday. The Padlet link that Beatrice very kindly put up has got links to everything, and hope to see you on some of those soon. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, and from Gloucester, have a great time, and I will see you very soon. Bye for now, everybody.